They won't say it out loud. Not in meetings. Not in feedback. Not even when you sit across from your manager and ask the question directly. What am I missing? They'll pause. Choose safe words. You're doing great. Just keep going. Your time will come. And that's the trap. Because while you keep going, someone else keeps rising. Again, and again, and again. This isn't about effort. It's not about intelligence. It's about something far more dangerous. You're missing a skill that doesn't show up on your job description. A skill no one teaches. A skill that silently decides who moves forward and who stays exactly where they are. Ethan Carter was 35 when the pattern stopped feeling random. Same building, same routine, same predictable rhythm. He wasn't struggling. He was consistent, reliable. The guy people trusted when things needed to be done right. Deadlines, always met. Problems, handled. Pressure, absorbed. Ethan wasn't average. He was solid, dependable, valuable. At least, that's what he believed. But every promotion cycle told a different story. His name came up. It always did. Ethan's doing great work. He's a strong contributor. He's close. Close. That word started to follow him. Year after year. Close, but not chosen. Replaced by people who didn't outwork him, didn't outlast him, didn't outproduce him. At first, Ethan did what most people do. He created explanations that protected his identity. Politics. Favoritism. Timing. It made sense. It felt fair. Because the alternative was uncomfortable. What if there was something he couldn't see? Something no one had pointed out? That thought didn't explode into his mind. It built slowly, quietly, until one moment forced it into the open. It was a leadership sync meeting. Ethan wasn't presenting. He was just there, observing, listening, half engaged, until someone else started speaking. Marcus Hale. A guy Ethan respected, but never saw as exceptional. Marcus wasn't the hardest worker, not the smartest in the room, not the most experienced. But the moment he began, something shifted. He didn't rush. He didn't ramble. He started with clarity. This quarter we eliminated a delay that was costing us 2 weeks per release. Silence. Attention. Then he walked through it. Not tasks. Not effort. Impact. Every sentence had direction. Every idea connected to something bigger. He wasn't explaining what he did. He was making people feel why it mattered. And the room responded. Leaders leaned forward. Questions came. Engagement grew. Respect was visible. And Ethan felt it. That quiet tension. That subtle discomfort when reality doesn't match your belief. Because Ethan had done more work on that project. Much more. But Marcus owned the story. That's when it hit. Not like motivation. Not like inspiration. But like exposure. Ethan realized something that rewired everything he believed. He had been doing the work, but he hadn't been translating it. He thought results were enough. That performance speaks. That effort gets noticed. But results don't speak. People do. And if you don't control how your work is seen, it becomes invisible. That night, Ethan couldn't escape it. He replayed everything. Past meetings, past reviews, past opportunities. And a pattern started forming. His presentations. Flat. Informational. Forgettable. His communication. Safe. Minimal. Efficient. But not impactful. He shared updates. Not meaning. He explained tasks. Not outcomes. He delivered value, but never positioned it. And suddenly, everything made sense. He wasn't being overlooked. He was being underestimated. And that difference is brutal. Because being overlooked feels unfair. Being underestimated, that's something you participated in, without realizing it. That realization cuts deep, because it removes the comfort of blame, and replaces it with responsibility. Ethan had skill. That was never the issue. The issue was visibility. Not loudness. Not arrogance. Clarity. Positioning. Narrative. The invisible layer of performance no one talks about. The layer that separates contributors from leaders. That gap doesn't show up in your workload. It shows up in perception. And perception is what gets promoted. The next morning felt different. Nothing had changed. But everything felt exposed. Same desk, same screen, same tasks. But now Ethan could see something he had ignored for years. Who controlled attention? Who shaped conversations? Who made their work feel important? And who quietly faded into the background? He saw both groups clearly, and for the first time, he saw exactly where he stood. Not because he lacked value, but because he failed to project it. That realization creates a moment, a dangerous one, because you have two choices. Dismiss it, protect your ego, say this isn't who I am, stay comfortable, or accept it, and step into discomfort, because this isn't about doing more work, it's about becoming visible, and visibility feels risky. Speaking when it's easier to stay silent, explaining when it feels unnecessary, owning space when you're used to shrinking. Ethan felt that resistance immediately, the urge to stay the same, to go back to what felt safe. But something had shifted, because now, he could see the game. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. The invisible gap had a shape, a presence, a cost. And for the first time in years, Ethan understood something most people never realize. He wasn't losing to better people. He was losing to people who made their value impossible to ignore. And that changes everything. Because now, it's not unfair, it's fixable. And that's where the real pressure begins. Because once you know what's missing, you don't get to stay the same. The moment you see it, the illusion breaks. And once it breaks, you can't go back to comfort. Ethan tried. For a few days, he went back to his routine. Same execution, same silence in meetings, same I'll just let the work speak. But now it felt different, forced, like pretending not to notice something obvious. Because every time someone else spoke with clarity, every time someone framed their work with impact, every time attention shifted away from him, it hit harder, not emotionally, logically, because now he understood the pattern, and patterns don't lie. That's when the real shift began. Not in action, in thinking. Ethan stopped asking, "Am I doing good work?" and started asking a different question. Can people see the value of what I do? That question is uncomfortable, because it forces you to confront something most people avoid. Execution is private, perception is public, and promotions happen in public, not inside your head, not inside your to-do list, but inside how others understand your contribution. That realization led him to something practical, not motivational, not abstract, a system. Because this wasn't about becoming louder, it was about becoming clearer. The first shift was simple, but brutal. Stop reporting effort. Start communicating impact. Before, Ethan would say things like, "I worked on the back-end optimization," or "I fixed the issue with the deployment pipeline." Accurate, but weak. Now he forced himself to translate. This reduced system downtime by 22. This cut deployment time from 3 hours to 40 minutes. Same work, different language. One sounds like activity, the other sounds like value. And value gets attention. At first it felt unnatural, almost uncomfortable, like he was exaggerating. But he wasn't. He was clarifying. There's a difference. Most people hide behind effort because it feels honest. But leaders don't promote effort. They promote outcomes. And if you don't make outcomes visible, they don't exist. That was step one. Translation. Turning invisible work into visible impact. The second shift was harder. Speak before you feel ready. Ethan had always waited. Waited until he was sure. Until his thoughts were perfect. Until his input felt necessary. But by the time he spoke, the moment had passed. The conversation had moved. And someone else had shaped the direction. So he created a rule. If you have something useful, say it early. Not perfectly. Clearly, this wasn't about talking more. It was about timing. Because in every meeting, there's a window, a small one, where direction is still forming. Miss it, and you're reacting. Catch it, and you're influencing. The first time he tried this, it didn't go smoothly. He spoke up in a team discussion. His point wasn't perfectly structured. He stumbled slightly. Someone interrupted. The room didn't pause for him the way it did for Marcus. And for a moment, that old voice came back. This isn't you. Stay in your lane. This is uncomfortable for a reason. That's the setback no one talks about. Because learning a visible skill means being visibly imperfect. And most people can't tolerate that. They retreat. They go back to silence, back to safety, back to invisibility. Ethan almost did. That meeting stayed with him the entire day, not because he failed, but because it felt exposed. But later that evening, something clicked. He replayed the moment, not emotionally, objectively. His point wasn't wrong, it just wasn't sharp, and that's a skill, not a personality flaw. So instead of retreating, he adjusted. That's the difference between people who stay stuck and people who shift. The next meeting he tried again, this time shorter, clearer. One idea, one outcome. Pause, and something small happened. Someone responded, built on his point. The conversation moved slightly in his direction. Not a breakthrough, but a signal. He was no longer invisible. That's how it starts. Not with confidence, with evidence. And that leads to the third shift. Control the narrative of your work. Not at the end, throughout. Before Ethan would finish a project, and then summarize it quickly, as if the work should speak for itself. Now he changed the timing. He started framing his work while it was happening. Quick updates, clear positioning. This is what we're solving. This is why it matters. This is the expected impact. So when the project finished, the story was already built. Leaders didn't need to guess. They already understood. That's how perception is shaped. Not at the end, but consistently, over time. And slowly, something changed. Not dramatically, but noticeably. People started asking him more questions. His input was requested earlier. His updates got more attention. Same Ethan, same skill, different visibility. But here's the part most people miss. This doesn't feel like progress at first. It feels like friction. Because you're operating outside your default. Speaking more, explaining more, positioning more. And your mind resists. It wants comfort, familiarity, silence. But growth doesn't feel like confidence. It feels like tension. And Ethan felt that tension every day. But now, he had something he didn't have before. Clarity. A system. A way to close the gap. And once you have that, you don't need motivation. You need consistency. Because the invisible skill isn't built in one moment. It's built in patterns. Repeated. Refined. Reinforced. Until one day, people don't just see your work. They feel your value. And when that happens, the game changes. But not instantly. Not yet. Because there's one more test. And it's the one that decides everything. The real test doesn't come when things are going well. It comes when doubt returns. Quietly. Without warning. Ethan had been applying the shifts for weeks. Speaking earlier. Framing impact. Controlling the narrative. And slowly, things were changing. People listened more. His ideas carried weight. Meetings felt different. But then came the moment that almost reset everything. Promotion cycle. Again. Same process. Same anticipation. Same internal tension he pretended not to feel. This time felt different. Not because he was hoping, but because he knew he had changed. And that creates a dangerous expectation. Because when you improve, you expect results. And when results don't come immediately, doubt hits harder than before. The decision came in a short meeting. No build-up. No drama. Just words. You've made strong progress. We've noticed your growth. But we're holding off this cycle. There it was. Again. Different wording. Same outcome. And for a moment, everything inside him tightened. That old voice came back instantly. Nothing changed. You're still the same. This doesn't work. That's the real breaking point. Not failure. Delay. Because delay feels like proof that effort is useless. And most people collapse right there. They retreat. Not physically. Internally. They stop trying in the areas that matter. They go back to comfort. Back to execution without visibility. Back to being reliable and invisible. Ethan felt that pull. Strong. Almost convincing. But something was different this time. He didn't react immediately. He didn't spiral. He paused and asked one question. Not emotional. Not defensive. Accurate. Am I the same person I was 3 months ago? The answer was clear. No. His communication had changed. His presence had changed. His visibility had changed. So if the outcome hadn't caught up yet, that didn't mean failure. It meant lag. That distinction saved him. Because success in this game isn't instant. Perception builds slowly, layer by layer, meeting by meeting, signal by signal, and then one day, it tips. But most people quit before that point, because they confuse delay with denial. Ethan didn't. He doubled down, not on effort, on precision. He refined everything. Shorter messages, clearer impact, stronger openings. He stopped over-explaining, started emphasizing outcomes. He didn't try to impress. He focused on clarity. And then something shifted, not loudly, but undeniably. A senior leader pulled him aside after a meeting. Not for feedback, for input. What do you think we should prioritize next? That question matters, because it signals something deeper. Not recognition of effort, trust in judgment. That's the shift. From contributor to someone whose thinking carries weight. Ethan answered simply. Direct. Outcome-focused. No rambling. No hesitation. And the conversation continued. Not as a formality, as engagement. That moment didn't change his title, but it changed his position, because influence doesn't start with a promotion. Promotion follows influence. And influence starts when people start listening differently. Over the next few weeks it compounded. He was looped into earlier discussions, asked for opinions before decisions were made. His words started shaping direction, not just reporting progress. And then it happened. Not dramatically, not emotionally. Just a meeting, a different tone, a different outcome. We're ready to move you into the next role. No long speech, no celebration, just confirmation. And strangely, Ethan didn't feel excited. Not immediately, because the real shift had already happened. The promotion wasn't the transformation, it was the result of it. Because what actually changed was identity. He was no longer the guy who just did the work. He was the one who made the work visible, understandable, valuable. And that identity doesn't disappear after a title change. That's the difference. Because if you don't change how you think, a promotion doesn't fix anything. You'll stay invisible, just at a higher level. But Ethan wasn't invisible anymore. And neither are you. If you're willing to see it. Because the truth is simple. You're not stuck because you lack skill. You're stuck because your skill isn't seen. And that's not a talent problem. It's a translation problem, a visibility problem, a perception problem. And those are learnable. But only if you stop hiding behind effort. Only if you stop waiting to be noticed. Only if you accept something uncomfortable. No one is coming to discover you. You have to make your value undeniable. Not louder, clearer, not more work, better positioning, not someday. Now, because every day you stay invisible, you're not just delaying a promotion, you're reinforcing an identity. And identities become permanent if you don't challenge them. So decide, not emotionally, practically. Are you the person who hopes to be recognized? Or the one who makes recognition inevitable? Because that choice is the real promotion.